noise-canceling headphones to escape the world, to block out the distractions. But what happens when that absolute silence is exactly what someone is using to hide right behind you? This is a true story of why you should never block out your surroundings. I've always believed that isolation is a luxury. When you live in a city like Boston, silence is something you have to buy. You buy it with noise-canceling headphones, you buy it with thick curtains, and occasionally you buy it by renting a cabin deep in the Appalachian Mountains for a week. I'm a software engineer, and I was facing a massive deadline. I needed to code for 14 hours a day without distractions. I found an Airbnb in western North Carolina. The listing boasted about being off the grid. It had satellite internet, but no cell service. The nearest town was a 40-minute drive down a winding, unpaved mountain road. It was perfect. I arrived on a Tuesday in late November. The cabin was a single-story A-frame surrounded by dense, ancient pines. The woods here didn't feel inviting. They felt imposing. They crowded the house, the branches almost scraping the large A-frame windows at the front. My routine was simple. Wake up, brew coffee, put on my high-end Sony noise-canceling headphones, and stare at my monitor until the sun went down. When those headphones are on, the world ceases to exist. There is only the code, the screen, and the absolute dead silence they create. It's sensory deprivation. The first 2 days were productive, but by Thursday, the isolation started to play tricks on me. It started small. Thursday morning, I walked into the kitchen to make coffee. My favorite ceramic mug, the one I had distinctly washed and left on the drying rack the night before, was sitting in the stainless steel sink. It was half filled with cold water. I stood there staring at it. The logical part of my brain, the engineer part, told me I had simply forgotten. When you are hyper-focused, you do things on autopilot. I washed the mug, made my coffee, and put my headphones back on. Friday evening, the temperature dropped drastically. I had the fireplace going. Around 9 p.m., I took my headphones off to rub my tired eyes. The sudden rush of ambient noise returning to my ears was jarring. The crackle of the fire, the wind outside, and then another sound. A heavy, deliberate thud from directly beneath my feet. The cabin had a crawl space. The floorboards were old and thick, but I felt the vibration travel up through the legs of my chair. I froze. I waited for a raccoon, a bear, an animal sound, but there was nothing, just the wind. I convinced myself it was the house settling in the freezing temperatures. I put the headphones back on. I turned the noise cancellation to the maximum setting. The world went dead quiet again. It was Saturday night when the illusion of safety shattered completely. It was 2 a.m. The only light in the cabin was the glow of my 2 massive monitors and the dying embers in the fireplace behind me. The darkness outside the A-frame windows was absolute. I was deeply engrossed in a complex string of code. My headphones were on. I was in the void. Suddenly, my main monitor flickered. The screen went pitch black as the system initiated an unexpected background update. For a split second, the monitor became a perfect, glossy black mirror. In the reflection of the screen, illuminated by the faint orange glow of the dying fire behind me, I saw him. A man. He was standing in the hallway entrance, exactly 4 feet behind my chair. He was wearing filthy, earth-caked clothes. His face was a mess of tangled, greasy hair and a thick beard. But the most terrifying part was his posture. He wasn't moving toward me. He was just standing perfectly still, staring at the back of my head. In his right hand, he held a heavy iron fire poker from my hearth. My heart seized so violently I thought my chest would crack open. My brain screamed at me to jump, to run, to scream. But a colder, more primal survival instinct took over. He doesn't know you saw him. I had to pretend the monitor was just loading. If I reacted, if I startled, he would swing that iron poker. I took a slow, deep breath, maintaining my posture. I reached forward and slowly typed on my keyboard, pretending I was frustrated by the update. I tapped the desk impatiently. I could see his reflection. He didn't move an inch. He was waiting for me to take the headphones off. I casually reached up, grabbed the ear cups, and slid them off my ears, resting them around my neck. The silence of the room flooded in. I could hear his breathing. A slow, wet, rattling wheeze directly behind me. "Damn update," I muttered out loud, keeping my voice steady, though my hands were trembling so violently I had to press them flat against the desk. Guess I'll get a glass of water. I pushed my chair back. I did not turn around. I stood up and walked toward the kitchen, which was to my left. I had to pass within 2 feet of him. I kept my eyes completely locked on the refrigerator. As I passed him, the smell hit me. It was the stench of damp earth, unwashed skin, and raw sewage. It took everything in my soul not to gag or break into a sprint. I reached the kitchen island. My car keys were sitting next to the sink. The front door was 10 feet away. I grabbed the keys. I didn't look back. I bolted. I hit the front door, twisted the deadbolt, and threw myself into the freezing night air. I didn't care about my laptop, my clothes, or my wallet. I hit the unlock button on my fob, practically diving into the driver's seat of my car. As I slammed the door and threw the car in reverse, he was standing right at the glass, both hands pressed against the pane, watching me leave. The police searched the property the next morning. The crawlspace access door around the back had been forced open. Inside, they found a makeshift bed of stolen blankets, food wrappers from my trash, and a collection of sharp stones. He had been living under the floorboards the entire week. He only came up into the house when he knew I was in the living room. When he knew I couldn't hear a thing. I graduated college in 2023 with a useless degree and a mountain of debt. To make ends meet while I searched for a real job, I drove for Uber Eats in the sprawling suburbs outside of Dallas, Texas. If you've never driven through the Sunbelt sprawl at night, it's a strange experience. Development out here happens aggressively. Massive corporate home builders buy up thousands of acres of flat, empty ranch land and throw up cookie-cutter subdivisions in a matter of months. It was a Tuesday night, around 11:45 p.m. The app was quiet. I was about to clock out and head home when a notification popped up. It was a massive order from a high-end steakhouse, paying nearly $40 for a single delivery. The catch? The drop-off was 12 miles away, right on the absolute edge of the county line. I accepted it. $40 is $40. The drive took me past the populated suburbs, past the strip malls, and out onto the dark 2-lane county highways. My GPS told me to turn left into a development called Whispering Pines Phase 4. The moment my tires hit the pavement of the subdivision, things felt wrong. The entrance had a massive stone sign, but the landscaping wasn't finished. There were no streetlights on. In fact, there were hardly any houses. I drove deeper into the maze. The GPS on my phone started to glitch. The digital car icon was spinning in circles, floating in a gray void on the map. Recalculating, the robotic voice chimed. Proceed to the route. I was driving down endless rows of concrete foundations and wooden skeletal frames of half-built houses. There were no construction vehicles, no porta-potties, nothing. Just the eerie skeletal ribs of future homes illuminated by my high beams. Finally, the GPS caught up. You have arrived at your destination. It placed me in front of a house at the very end of a dead-end cul-de-sac. This house was entirely finished. It had brick siding, a manicured lawn, and a paved driveway. But it was completely dark. No porch light, no light leaking through the blinds. There were no cars in the driveway, no trash cans on the curb. I parked at the curb and looked at my app for the delivery instructions. It read, "Hand it to me. Please bring to the back patio door. The front doorbell is broken." I sat in my locked car, the engine idling. The smell of the expensive steak in the passenger seat was making me nauseous. Every instinct I had as a 23-year-old woman told me not to get out of the car. "Just leave it on the porch," I muttered to myself. "Take a picture and run." I grabbed the heavy paper bags, pushed my door open, and stepped out into the Texas heat. The crickets were deafening. I walked quickly up the driveway, keeping my eyes locked on the dark, recessed front porch. I set the bags down right at the front door. I pulled out my phone, snapped the required photo, and turned around to walk back to my car. That's when the motion sensor light on the side of the garage clicked on. It was blindingly bright, flooding the driveway and the side yard with harsh, white light. Parked flush against the side of the house, hidden in the shadows until that very moment, was a rusted, windowless, white work van. Its rear doors were wide open. My blood ran cold. The van was positioned perfectly so that if I had walked to the back patio as instructed, I would have had to squeeze right past those open doors in the pitch black. I froze, terrified the light would alert whoever was inside. Then, from the dark, skeletal framing of the unfinished house right next door, I heard the crunch of gravel. Two men stepped out from behind a stack of drywall. They weren't construction workers. They were wearing dark clothes, and they were staring right at me. They didn't run toward me. They just started walking, fanning out, trying to cut off my angle to my car. I dropped my phone. I didn't even bend down to pick it up. I sprinted for my car, my keys already in my hand. I hit the unlock button, threw myself inside, and locked the doors before my legs were even fully pulled in. I slammed the car into reverse and floored it. The tires squealed on the fresh asphalt as I backed out of the cul-de-sac. As my headlights swept across the two men, they both broke into a full sprint toward my car. One of them lunged, slapping the hood of my car with an open palm as I swung the wheel, throwing him off balance. I threw it in drive and sped down the winding, unlit streets of the subdivision. I didn't know the way out. My GPS was still glitching, trying to route me back to the house. I was driving blind through a maze of identical, empty streets, terrified I would hit a dead end. I checked my rearview mirror. The white van was behind me. It didn't have its headlights on. I could only see the moonlight reflecting off its windshield. It was following me, matching my speed perfectly. I took a sharp right, then a left, driving erratically to lose them. Finally, I saw the stone entrance sign in the distance. I didn't slow down. I flew out onto the two-lane county highway, pushing my car up to 80 miles an hour. The van didn't follow me onto the highway. It just sat idling at the entrance of the dark subdivision, watching me leave. When I called the police from a lit gas station 10 miles away, they sent a cruiser to check the address. The house was a model home. It hadn't been sold yet, and it certainly hadn't ordered a $200 steak dinner. The delivery was a lure, designed specifically to pull a lone driver into a dead-end street in the dead of night. This happened in the fall of 2022. I was making the solo haul back to Pennsylvania from California. 5 days of concrete, gas station coffee, and the unique brand of insanity that comes from being alone in a tin box for 18 hours a day. I was on I-80, driving through that endless void of Nebraska. It was 2:48 a.m. The sky was heavy, and the darkness seemed to actively absorb my headlights. I'd been awake for 19 hours. I was experiencing highway hypnosis, seeing shapes in the periphery that turned out to be nothing. I knew I needed to stop. When I saw the blue sign for a rest area, instinct took over. I pulled onto the off-ramp. This wasn't a commercial truck stop. It was a desolate, state-run brick building surrounded by dried, winter-killed shrubs. The sodium lights were a sickly, artificial amber, humming with a low 60-cycle buzz. I parked. The silence was physical, heavy on my chest. There was only one other vehicle in the lot, an old, beat-up, dark green sedan parked at the furthest edge, nestled against the tree line. It looked abandoned. I walked into the main building. Inside, the sterile, blindingly white fluorescent lights whined. I went into the farthest stall in the men's room. I was sitting there in the silence when I heard the main door groan open. The footsteps that followed weren't normal. They were slow, deliberate. 1, 2, 3. They didn't move toward a urinal. They paced down the aisle of stalls, stopping directly outside mine. I pulled my feet up onto the toilet seat, terrified. I stared at the gap at the bottom of the door. In the reflection of the polished tile, I saw a dark, indistinct figure standing perfectly still, just waiting. After an eternity, the footsteps retreated. The main door slammed. I waited a full minute before bolting out of the bathroom, desperate to get back to the safety of my car. But as I ran out into the amber-lit parking lot, a figure stepped out from the darkness, blocking my path to my car. It was a woman in a dirty, oversized hoodie. Her hair was matted, but her eyes were wide, playing a role. "Please, you have to help me," she rasped. "My car won't start, and my baby is in the back seat. He's freezing." She pointed to the old green sedan in the dark corner of the lot. My moral compass kicked in. I couldn't leave a child to freeze. I agreed to help, following her toward the deep darkness where the sedan was parked. But as we got closer, logic pierced through the fear. She had no keys in her hand. The sedan's tires were fully inflated, not neglected. We got within 10 feet. I looked through the tinted rear window to see the baby. There was no car seat, just a pile of old winter jackets bundled together to look like a small figure, topped with an old hat. It was a decoy. I froze. And then, I saw the trunk of the massive Crown Victoria. It was slightly popped open. From the gap, I heard the undeniable, static-filled crackle of a two-way radio. Bzzz. Is he clean? Bzzz. I had my empty coffee cup in my hand. In a blind panic, I hurled it at her face, screaming, "Get clean!" I spun around and sprinted faster than I ever have in my life. I hit my car fob, dove inside, and locked the doors, flooring the accelerator. As I merged back onto the highway at 90 miles per hour, I looked in my rearview mirror. The woman was standing in the lot, watching me, and the trunk of the sedan was now wide open. A massive man was sitting on the bumper, holding a long tire iron, watching my taillights disappear into the void.